Welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about this gold standard poll from the Albuquerque Times, I believe it's what it's called, or the Albuquerque Journal. It's actually a New Mexico poll, a state that we haven't been talking a lot about this election because Kamala Harris has been able to really lock down these more Democratic states. Yes, they weren't quite safe, like Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia, New Hampshire, etc. But what Kamala Harris has been able to do is really lock down these Democratic voters. She has proven in poll after poll that she will be able to turn out these voters. So, again, these sort of states, these 10-point margins for Biden in 2020 or 7-point margins, we really haven't been talking about them a lot. However, this one's important because, similarly to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Iowa poll, the Des Moines Register poll, which Ann Selzer and company sponsors. New Mexico has sort of a legendary gold standard poll. Again, this being the Albuquerque Journal poll. So, what does their poll say? They say that Kamala Harris is, of course, leading the state. That's no surprise. But what matters is the margin, because when we see the margin and how it changes from 2020, we can get a grasp of how this election is turning in terms of if Kamala Harris is doing better or worse than Joe Biden in 2020, or of course, in the vice versa, is Donald Trump doing worse or better than he did himself the last election? So their new poll, the Albuquerque Journal's new poll from New Mexico, of course. Again, this is just a New Mexico poll. This is not nationwide. But in their state, Kamala Harris is ahead by 9 percentage points over Donald Trump. And again, this is a margin with, in a state that, we're not going to talk about a lot. We're not going to talk about, wow, maybe New Mexico is competitive. This poll clearly does not reflect that. However, what is important is talking about how that margin compares to the 2020 margin. Joe Biden was expected to win, Joe Biden did win New Mexico in 2020 by 10.8%. Today, Harris is expected to win again in this gold standard A+ polls that we can trust completely. She is ahead by 9. So she's underperforming Biden by almost 2 points in this election. It's 1.8% to be exact. And that sort of difference really does matter when you round from 1.8 to 2. That can throw a lot of things off. And of course, not every state is going to become 1.2% more Republican from 2020. That's just not how elections work. For example, looking at 2016 to 2020, you had almost all states trend towards the left. You had some way more than others. For example, New York only became half a point more Democratic, while Minnesota became 6 points more Democratic, and Colorado became 7 points more Democratic, while Florida actually became more Republican by 2 points. So obviously that 1.8% gain that Donald Trump is getting in New Mexico, that will not be reflected in every other state. I think everybody knows that. And what is good for Kamala Harris is that just looking at polling strictly, which of course I never do, but just looking at polling strictly, Harris is performing better in the battleground state polls than she is in the nationwide votes. For example, what I mean by that is that nationally, now again, this is only to compare. I'm not using these polls as direct reference, but it's only to compare how she is doing nationally versus the battleground states. Now, as you can see, Harris is ahead in the popular vote, but by less than Hillary Clinton won it by in 2016, meaning she would not win the Electoral College. She would not be elected the president. Now in Michigan, or just looking at all these battleground states, actually, you've got Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, basically toss up. But Harris is leading currently in Michigan, Nevada, Wisconsin. Just overall, she's performing. It'd be a much closer election if you just go by the battleground state numbers than it would be if you just went by this 1.8% margin that Harris currently has in the national polls. That would not be good. It'd be a little bit better in the battleground states. So the point is, of course, this won't directly translate to the other battleground states, but it is still helpful to get a grasp on how things stand, and it does look better for her than of course these national averages do, because again, these national averages, they're flooded with these very biased and partisan pollsters that really throw everything off. But it's polls like these that are completely nonpartisan and are gold standard. And yes, they're just conducted in one state, but it still gets us a grasp of how things stand. The Ann Selzer poll, the Des Moines Register poll from Iowa. That's also very important to see because, again, they get the results spot on every time. In 2020, very rarely, honestly, in 2020, did pollsters even get the margin within the margin of error. For example, Biden was ahead by 3 in this poll, in this Democratic sponsored poll, which is insane to see. He won it by, of course, 11 when you round. So well out of the margin of error. Very few are actually within the margin of error. But you might notice, oh, sorry, this is, yeah, no, 2020. I'm trying to find, I don't know where it is, but of course you've got the Albuquerque journal poll, but I guess I can't see it. But anyway, their poll again said that in 2020 Biden would win by something like 11 and a half. He won by 10.8, almost spot on, well within the margin of error. So, when you've got these when you've got these partisan polls really flooding the national averages more than anything, and that also proves, the prominence of these partisan polls. Of course, they do more national polls than battleground state polls. More reliable pollsters do battleground state polls. So the fact that Harris is doing better in the battleground state polls than the national polls, if that makes sense, proves the prominence in these averages of these partisan Republican polls. Um, but again, so we have to rely on these gold standard polls, these A+ pollsters like this Albuquerque Journal poll. So what does it mean for 2024? I guess this is still my forecast. This was it when I made it last, but this is seriously a toss-up election. Yes, it's 287 to 251, not just quite that 269 to 269. That would be a tie, but it is still such a close election. I mean, Arizona and Wisconsin, I have razor thin. I have like a half a point margins or less for Harris. In Wisconsin and Arizona, Donald Trump could easily win both, and he's elected president just like that. It's completely in the realm of possibility with how close some of these states are. I might be willing to put Arizona back into the Republican column based off the early voting numbers that we have. So, when it comes to this poll, Harris is losing 1.8% from where Biden was in 2020. When you look at these other states, she'd lose Wisconsin. That was only decided by 0.6%. I mean, again, this is if she's losing exactly 1.8% in every state, which I doubt. But Wisconsin would flip to Trump, Arizona would flip to Trump, Georgia would flip to Trump, Michigan, Nevada would not. But the big one, Pennsylvania would. Let's just do that map real quick. Of course, Wisconsin is a lean margin, Arizona's a lean margin, Georgia's a lean margin, North Carolina would stay a lean margin, and then Pennsylvania would flip to Trump, and he wins 291 to 247. This, honestly, might be the map. It is completely, completely possible. This looks like, to me, a map that could really, really happen. So it should be extremely concerning for the Harris campaign. They need to get these sorts of numbers up. And yes, Joe Biden did win over 300 electoral votes in 2020, but this was still such a close map. The smallest of change from 2020 could flip the entire thing. They could flip all 7 battleground states, even if Trump gains just 3% in all of them. The highest margin for Biden of the 7 core battlegrounds was plus 2.8%. And besides Nevada, which was 2.4, besides Michigan and Nevada, the next closest was Pennsylvania, all the way down at 1.2%. Donald Trump just needs to gain a little bit everywhere from 2020, and he is elected president. This should be very much a wake-up call for the Harris campaign. At one time, they were heavily favored to win, but now it is pure toss-up. Honestly, I don't know what to say about who's going to win this election. It could really be either candidate. So we'll see. But we'll see how this race changes. That's the most important. But now we are only 15 days away. So if the Harris campaign needs to do or is going to do something, then they have to do it right now. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe. That helps out a lot. Drop a comment as well to let me hear your thoughts on this topic, and I'll see you all later.